On the morning of June 7th, 1992, a mother and her daughter didn't show up for work. Their friend never made it home. And the quiet city of Springfield, Missouri, would never be the same again. 3 women vanished from a single house. No broken windows, no blood, no witnesses. Just silence. It's a case that still keeps investigators awake decades later. A story of confusion, fear, and a haunting question that refuses to fade. How can 3 people simply disappear? In this documentary, we'll follow the real evidence, retrace every lead, and uncover the hidden threads that law enforcement and the public have chased for over 30 years. This isn't fiction. This is the vanishing of the Springfield Three, the true crime that still haunts America. We'll explore the night of the disappearance, the mistakes made in those critical first 24 hours, and the long shadow cast by rumors, suspects, and dead ends. We'll talk to witnesses, investigators, and locals who still feel the chill when they hear the names: Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall. Their faces became symbols of an entire generation's fear. Their story became a benchmark of what happens when answers refuse to come. So sit back and listen carefully. Every detail matters. Every clue could still hold the key. Because the truth isn't just buried in files. It's hidden in the silence that began that summer night. June 7th, 1992, Springfield, Missouri, USA. A quiet American town resting under the stillness of a summer night. Families asleep. Porch lights dim. Nothing out of the ordinary. But before dawn breaks, 3 women will vanish, leaving behind an empty house, a half-made bed, and a mystery that still chills investigators 3 decades later. Sherrill Levitt, 47. Her daughter, Suzie Streeter, 19. And Suzie's best friend, Stacy McCall, also 18. All gone. Vanished without a sound. Brief pause. Soft haunting piano cue begins. That night, Suzie and Stacy had attended high school graduation parties, celebrating the end of one chapter and the start of another. They laughed, took photos, and promised to meet the next morning for a trip to a water park. But they never arrived. By morning, the girls' families began to worry. Calls went unanswered. Doors remained locked. And when loved ones entered the Levitt home, nothing could prepare them for what they found and didn't find. Inside, everything seemed normal. The women's purses were still there. Their cars parked outside. The television left on. A glass lamp shattered on the floor, as if knocked over in a hurry. But the women themselves gone. No struggle. No forced entry. No witnesses. Just silence. It was as if the 3 had been lifted out of their lives in a single, terrifying instant. And so began one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in American history, known today as the Springfield Three. What happened inside that house in Springfield? Was it a break-in gone wrong? A planned abduction? Or something far more disturbing that no one has yet uncovered? To understand the night they vanished, we must start from the beginning, with 3 women whose lives seemed ordinary, until the moment they disappeared forever. June 6th, 1992. A night that began in joy, laughter, and hope. For the small, close-knit community of Springfield, Missouri, it was graduation night. Across town, parents stayed up late waiting for their kids to come home, while newly minted graduates filled the air with excitement about the future. Among them, Suzie Streeter and Stacy McCall, 2 inseparable best friends just out of high school, full of plans and possibilities. That evening, Suzie and Stacy attended a series of graduation parties. There were hugs, Polaroid photos, plans for summer vacations, and whispered dreams about college life ahead. They laughed with friends, posed for pictures, and, by all accounts, were happy, safe, and sober. Their plan was simple: stay overnight at a friend's house after the last party, then meet up with others the next morning for a trip to the water park Whitewater in Branson, Missouri. But as the night stretched on, things didn't go as planned. The friend's house they intended to stay at had become too crowded, full of guests sleeping on floors and couches. So, just after 2 a.m., Suzie and Stacy decided to return to Suzie's home, the small house that she shared with her mother, Sherrill Levitt, on 1717 East Elmar Street. Suzie's mother, Sherrill, was a respected hairdresser. That night, she'd gone to bed early after speaking to a friend on the phone around 11:15 p.m. Everything seemed peaceful. Suzie and Stacy never made another call. No one saw them again. Sometime between 2:15 and 3 a.m., something happened inside that quiet home, something no one has been able to fully explain for more than 3 decades. When morning came, the bright Missouri sun rose over Springfield, casting light on what would soon become one of America's most haunting missing persons cases. At that same hour, families were waking up, expecting to hear from their daughters. But there would be no phone calls, no cheerful check-ins, just ringing lines, unanswered. By mid-morning, small concerns began to grow into unease. And by noon, unease turned to panic. Something was wrong, very wrong. When friends arrived at the Levitt home to look for Suzie and Stacy, they found a scene that made no sense. Cars parked outside, lights still on, purses untouched, and a shattered lamp on the floor. But not a single sign of the 3 women. It was as if the world had swallowed them whole. June 7th, 1992, a warm Sunday morning in Springfield, Missouri. For most families, it was a day of rest after the long night of graduation celebrations. But for the families of Suzie Streeter and Stacy McCall, worry was already setting in. The girls had promised to call that morning before heading to the water park. By 9 a.m., neither had shown up. Calls to Suzie's house rang endlessly. No answer. At first, their families assumed they had overslept. It had been a long night. But as time passed, an uncomfortable silence settled over the morning. By noon, that silence became unbearable. Around midday, friends and family decided to drive to the Levitt home, 1717 East Elmar Street, a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. Nothing unusual at first glance. 3 cars were parked in the driveway: Suzie's red Ford Escort, Stacy's Toyota Corolla, and Sherrill's blue Corsica. All there, all locked. When friends approached the house, they noticed something odd. The front door was unlocked. Inside, everything appeared almost too normal. The TV in the living room was still on, showing static, the kind that fills an empty house with white noise. On a nearby table sat Sherrill's purse, Suzie's and Stacy's, untouched, filled with cash, keys, and identification. In the bedrooms, the beds appeared slept in, sheets slightly wrinkled, makeup still laid out. Nothing seemed ransacked, yet something felt off. There was a shattered glass lampshade near the bed, no sign of what caused it. One of Stacy's friends, Janelle Kirby, arrived with her boyfriend. Concerned, she used the house phone to call her own number, hoping to leave a message in case the women came back. But instead of hearing the girls' voices, she got something else. A strange, muffled male voice, described as weird and sexually suggestive, whispered something before the line went dead. To this day, no one knows who made that call. Police later dismissed it as a prank, but some believe it may have been the voice of the person who took them. Outside, neighbors recalled hearing dogs barking around 3 a.m., but no screams, no cars speeding away. Just another quiet night in suburban Missouri. By afternoon, the house was full of worried visitors, friends, relatives, even acquaintances. They unknowingly walked through what may have been the crime scene, touching doorknobs, cleaning glass, even emptying ashtrays, all before police ever arrived. Unknowingly, the most crucial hours of this case were already gone. And when the police finally stepped into that home, the damage had already been done. The Springfield Police Department launches its investigation, but from the very start, mistakes, confusion, and missed opportunities will haunt every step. By the afternoon of June 7th, 1992, what began as worry had turned into panic. Friends and family of the missing women had searched the house, the yard, and the street, but there was no trace of Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, or Stacy McCall. At 7:16 p.m., the Springfield Police Department officially received the missing persons report. When detectives first arrived at 1717 East Delmar Street, the scene was chaotic. Concerned relatives, neighbors, and friends had already been in and out of the home, trying to help, unaware that their good intentions were erasing critical clues. Officers noted there were no signs of forced entry. The front door was unlocked. The glass lamp on the nightstand was broken, But that was the only hint of disturbance. Every purse, every car, every essential belonging of the three women remained in the house, untouched. Police photographed the scene, collected minimal evidence, and dusted for prints. But even in those first few hours, mistakes were made. The crime scene wasn't sealed. Evidence wasn't cataloged correctly. Officers later admitted that dozens of fingerprints collected that day were contaminated or never properly logged. At first, authorities treated it as a case of missing persons, assuming the women had gone on a trip or decided to leave voluntarily. But family members insisted otherwise. They knew something was wrong. Sherrill, a dedicated hairdresser, had appointments booked for Sunday morning. She was punctual. She would never miss work without calling. Suzie and Stacy were responsible young women, deeply close to their families. There were no signs of rebellion, no secret plans, no indication they would run away. Detectives began interviewing neighbors. One resident mentioned hearing a loud noise around 3:30 a.m., like a car door slamming. Another saw a strange green van parked near the Levitt home late that night, a van that would soon become central to one of the most perplexing clues in the entire case. As investigators fanned out, they began searching nearby fields, wooded areas, and roadsides. Helicopters circled overhead, and the local media began reporting the triple disappearance. Springfield, Missouri, a peaceful, middle American town, was suddenly gripped by fear. What had happened inside that home between 2 a.m. and dawn? Was it someone they knew, or a stranger who struck by chance? Detectives were running out of time, and they didn't even know it. As the days turned into weeks, investigators began to chase leads, some solid, others bizarre. From mysterious phone calls to that ominous green van, the case begins to take unexpected turns. In the first 48 hours after the disappearance, Springfield police scrambled to find any thread that might explain what had happened to Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall. But instead of answers, every discovery only deepened the confusion. Inside the house, investigators collected a few small items of interest: that broken glass lamp, a bent window screen, and fingerprints that didn't seem to match anyone in the household. But none of it pointed to a suspect. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, and no indication the women had left willingly. The most compelling lead came from a witness, a woman who lived nearby and reported seeing a strange green Dodge van parked on the street near the Levitt home in the early hours of June 7th. She said the van had been there around 2:30 or 3 a.m., and that a young woman, resembling Suzie, was seen standing near it, looking distressed. Police immediately issued a public alert for information about the van. But despite hundreds of tips, the mysterious vehicle was never located. As detectives dug deeper, new details emerged. One neighbor recalled hearing a woman scream around 3 a.m., followed by the sound of tires squealing. Others reported seeing unfamiliar men at the graduation parties the girls attended that night. Still, no single clue fit neatly into the timeline. The phone call left on Janelle Kirby's answering machine, that strange male voice, haunted everyone who heard it. Investigators tried to trace it but failed. Phone technology in 1992 offered little help. To this day, the content of that message remains disputed. Some say it was a prank. Others believe it was the killer's taunt. Meanwhile, the Levitt home became a revolving door of police, press, and the public. Hundreds of fingerprints and samples were collected, yet many were later ruled contaminated. Potential evidence, including vacuum cleaner contents and cigarette butts, were logged but never tested due to limited technology at the time. Even more confusing were the personal items left behind. Suzie's jewelry still sat on her dresser. Stacy's clothes for the next day were neatly folded. Sherrill's cigarettes and lighter, items she always carried, remained untouched. It was as though they had simply stepped out for a moment and vanished into thin air. Rumors began spreading fast. Some speculated the women were abducted by someone they knew, perhaps coerced into leaving the house quietly. Others believed it was a random home invasion gone wrong. But with no ransom, no calls, and no evidence, every theory seemed to collapse on itself. Days turned into weeks, and hope began to fade. The local community was terrified. Parents locked their doors. Teenagers avoided going out at night. And police, though determined, were quickly running out of leads. Springfield had never seen anything like it before. 3 women, 1 house, no witnesses, no trace. Whatever happened that night, it was done with precision and silence. By late June 1992, 2 weeks after the Springfield Three disappeared, investigators had followed more than 1,000 tips. None brought them closer to finding Sherrill, Suzie, or Stacy. And so began the second phase of the investigation: theories, suspects, and a desperate search for answers. At first, detectives focused on people who had crossed paths with the women in the weeks before they vanished. One early lead was a man named Dustin Richtenwald, Suzie's ex-boyfriend, and his friend Michael Clay. The two had recently been charged with breaking into a local mausoleum, stealing skulls and bones for what they claimed was a prank. Suzie had testified against them in court, and some speculated revenge might have been a motive. But both men were questioned and passed polygraph tests. Police eventually cleared them of involvement. Still, the link between Suzie's testimony and her sudden disappearance left a shadow over the case. Next, attention turned to the mysterious green van seen near the Levitt home that night. Multiple witnesses described it as an older model Dodge or Chevy. One said she saw a man with dark, bushy hair talking to a young woman who looked distressed. Police set up roadblocks and released sketches, but the van and its driver were never found. Then came the jailhouse confession. In 1993, a convicted criminal named Robert Craig Cox, already imprisoned in Texas for kidnapping and robbery, claimed he knew what had happened to the Springfield Three. Cox had once lived in Springfield and even worked at a local car dealership at the time of the disappearance. When questioned, he told reporters, "They're dead, and they'll never be found." Investigators took his claim seriously. Cox had a violent past and had once been a suspect in the 1974 murder of a Florida woman. But when pressed for details, he refused to say more, claiming it was not the right time. To this day, Cox remains in prison, and the veracity of his statement has never been proven. Yet, many believe he knows exactly what happened. Beyond Cox, dozens of other theories emerged. A serial abductor passing through Missouri, a local cover-up, or even connections to human trafficking routes operating along nearby Interstate 44. Each theory offered fragments of possibility, but never proof. Some locals began whispering darker suspicions that the 3 women had been buried under new construction sites around Springfield. One rumor pointed to a parking garage at a local hospital. Years later, private investigators used ground-penetrating radar and found anomalies beneath the concrete, but no excavation was ever approved. Others believe the women might have been taken far from Missouri, victims of organized crime, or transported across state lines. The lack of a crime scene made every possibility equally plausible. By the end of 1993, the case had consumed the Springfield Police Department. Detectives rotated in and out, working endless hours, yet the mystery remained sealed tight. No bodies, no confessions, no closure. And as the years passed, the line between evidence and speculation grew thinner. Theories kept the case alive, but they also buried the truth beneath a mountain of confusion. 3 women, gone without a trace, and dozens of suspects who all led nowhere. Among the many leads, one clue refused to die: that mysterious green van and the shadowy figure seen behind its wheel. Was it coincidence, or the missing key to this entire mystery? For over 3 decades, one detail has haunted this case: a van. Not a weapon, not a fingerprint, not a body. Just a van. A mysterious, mossy green Dodge or Chevy, old, box-shaped, and out of place on the quiet streets of Springfield, Missouri. Multiple witnesses came forward saying they saw the van near 1717 East Delmar Street in the early hours of June 7, 1992, the same window of time when Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy vanished. One woman, who lived just blocks away, described seeing a man standing beside the van, talking to a young blonde woman who looked uneasy. When the headlights of her car hit them, the man turned his face away, as if hiding. She didn't think much of it until the news broke the next morning. When she saw Susie's photo on television, she froze. It was the same girl, she said, the one she'd seen by the van. The van was described as an early 1980s model, faded green paint, possibly with rust along the side panels. Police issued a regional alert. Roadblocks were set up. Drivers were questioned. Dozens of green vans across Missouri were inspected, photographed, and cleared. But the right one, if it existed, was never found. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed the van belonged to a local handyman who had been seen doing repair work near the Levitt home. Others suspected a traveling construction worker or a man known to cruise late-night neighborhoods in a similar vehicle. Every lead fell apart. The plates never matched, and witnesses contradicted one another. The green van theory, as it became known, grew into an obsession for both investigators and the public. Over the years, countless tips about green vans poured in from across the country, Texas, Oklahoma, even as far as Florida. Each time, detectives followed up, and each time, they found nothing. One retired officer later admitted, "We chased that van for years. It became a ghost, something we could never catch." In the 2000s, true crime enthusiasts and amateur sleuths revisited the case, analyzing police reports, sketching maps, and comparing eyewitness accounts. Some theorized the van might have been used to lure the women out of the house. Others believed it was used to transport them, and that their abduction was quiet, quick, and carefully planned. The van became a symbol of the entire mystery. Visible, yet untouchable. Simple, yet full of meaning. To this day, some say if the van were ever found, the entire case could be solved. But 30 years later, that shadow still rolls silently through the streets of memory, an echo of a clue that led nowhere. As the years dragged on, evidence decayed, witnesses faded, and the trail went cold. But rumors of mistakes, missed evidence, and hidden truths began to surface from inside the investigation itself. When police first entered 1717 East Delmar Street, they didn't see the house as a crime scene. At least, not yet. There were no broken doors, no smashed windows, and no signs of struggle. It looked almost too normal. Friends and family had already been in and out that morning, worried and searching. They tidied up the kitchen, checked the bedrooms, even swept glass off the porch. By the time investigators arrived, crucial evidence, fingerprints, footprints, and fibers had already been disturbed or destroyed. The front door was unlocked. Susie's bed was neatly made. Sherrill's reading glasses sat beside an open book on the nightstand. In the bathroom, makeup and hair dryers were still plugged in, as if they'd been interrupted mid-morning routine. Even more puzzling, all three women's cars were parked outside. Their purses were lined up together, untouched. Cash, credit cards, and keys still inside. It was as if they had all been called away suddenly and expected to come back. Police soon realized they might be dealing with a kidnapping, but by then, the house was already contaminated. Up to 18 people had entered the property before it was secured, leaving behind dozens of unknown fingerprints and footprints that couldn't be traced. Reporters, neighbors, even friends who meant well, all left traces that blurred the original scene. Forensic teams tried to recover what they could: partial prints, hair strands, a few cigarette butts. But none could be tied definitively to a suspect. The lamp that had been broken near the front window, a potential sign of struggle, was swept up before photos were taken. And then there was the phone call. Early that morning, a friend checking in on Sherrill's house heard an odd message left on the answering machine. A man's voice making a crude remark, followed by what sounded like a muffled cry. The friend accidentally erased it while trying to replay the message. That call was never recovered. As the days went on, the once tidy house became the epicenter of chaos. Police, press, and psychics all trampled through the rooms. The more people entered, the less the scene could tell. By the end of that first week, investigators admitted privately that the chance to collect clean evidence was gone. It was a devastating mistake, one that would haunt detectives for decades. Every time new technology emerged, from DNA analysis to digital forensics, they had nothing usable to test. In the words of one investigator, "We didn't lose the women that night. We lost the trail." The home at 1717 East Elmar would remain empty for months, frozen in time, a silent monument to the investigation that began too late. With the trail going cold, police turned to psychics, prisoners, and whispers of buried evidence. A theory emerges that the women's remains may lie beneath concrete, hidden in plain sight. By the mid-1990s, the case of the Springfield Three had gone cold. There were no arrests, no suspects, and no clear direction. But there was one rumor, persistent, eerie, and impossible to ignore. It began with whispers about a local construction site, a brand-new parking garage being built at Cox South Hospital in Springfield, Missouri. The theory claimed that while the concrete was being poured, the bodies of Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall were secretly buried within the foundation. The idea first surfaced years after the disappearance, but spread quickly through town. Some said a contractor working on the site had confessed to involvement. Others believed the women had been abducted and killed, and their bodies hidden beneath tons of concrete before the slab hardened forever. It sounded outlandish, but investigators couldn't dismiss it completely. The timeline matched the period of active construction, and the hospital site was less than 3 miles from the Levitt home. In 2007, nearly 15 years after the disappearance, a mechanical engineer named Rick Norland brought the theory back into focus. Using ground-penetrating radar, he scanned the parking garage's surface and detected 3 anomalies beneath the concrete, shapes roughly the size of human graves. Norland reported his findings to police, but after months of review, the Springfield Police Department declined to dig. Officials argued that the anomalies could be construction debris and that excavating the site would be costly and disruptive, especially with no hard evidence connecting the women to the location. For families of the missing, it was a crushing blow. Each year, they had waited for a break, a miracle, a truth, and once again, the doors seemed to close. To this day, the Cox Hospital garage remains untouched, a monument to mystery and frustration. Visitors often describe an unsettling feeling standing on its upper levels, knowing that beneath the concrete could lie the answers no one has ever found. Investigators have since confirmed that while the concrete burial theory remains unproven, it's one of the few that still sparks discussion among detectives and true crime followers alike. Even seasoned officers admit that if there was ever a perfect place to hide evidence forever, a freshly poured foundation would be it. Decades later, the rumor endures. The 3 missing women, gone without a trace, may be closer than anyone imagines, but still out of reach. In the shadows of Springfield, the ground itself may be holding a secret it will never let go. As time passes and hope fades, confessions begin to surface from prison cells, from guilty minds, and from those who claim to know something. But are these truth tellers or attention seekers? When a case goes cold, the silence can be unbearable. And sometimes, that silence draws voices from the unlikeliest of places. Over the years, several people have stepped forward claiming to know what happened to Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall. Some offered clues, others sought attention. One of the earliest confessions came from a convicted criminal serving time in another state. He claimed he'd been part of a group that abducted and murdered the 3 women after mistaking Suzie for someone else. He offered locations, names, and details, all of which sounded convincing at first. But when police followed up, every lead fell apart. The timeline didn't match, and his story changed with each interview. Then came another inmate's story, a man who claimed to have overheard a confession in prison. He named 2 local men, both allegedly involved in drug trafficking, who supposedly buried the women beneath an old farmhouse near Springfield. Police searched the area with cadaver dogs, but again, nothing. The confessions kept coming, each one darker, more dramatic, more detailed than the last. Some claimed the women were victims of a revenge killing. Others said they were witnesses silenced after seeing something they shouldn't have. One even claimed that Suzie had been targeted because of her testimony in a car theft case. Investigators learned quickly that prison confessions can be dangerous, not because they solve cases, but because they distract from real leads. Each false story drained resources, time, and hope. Still, some detectives wondered, what if one of them had been telling the truth? What if, buried within all the lies and attention-seeking, there was a clue they missed? One particularly haunting claim came from a man in the early 2000s who said he helped pour the concrete at the Cox Hospital site and knew something was in there. When pressed, he refused to give more details and later died before investigators could interview him again. Each confession reopened old wounds for the victims' families. Every new rumor brought the media back, headlines flashing promises of answers that never came. Sherrill's friends and family held onto fading hope, while Stacy's parents endured years of emotional whiplash, caught between belief and heartbreak. By the 2010s, police had cataloged dozens of so-called confessions. None could be verified. No physical evidence ever surfaced. The truth, it seemed, remained just out of reach, trapped between myth and memory. Today, investigators remain open to credible information, but the flood of false confessions has made it nearly impossible to separate fact from fiction. What's real? What's rumor? What's guilt-driven fantasy? Some say the killer may have confessed a dozen times and still gone unheard. And somewhere out there, perhaps the one person who truly knows what happened has never said a word. Decades later, the families and the community still refuse to give up. They turn to modern technology, DNA testing, and digital sleuths to chase what's left of the truth. Could the next breakthrough finally expose what really happened? For years, the Springfield Three case sat on dusty shelves, another unsolved mystery from a world before smartphones, social media, and DNA databases. But as the years passed, technology evolved, and with it came a new wave of hope. By the early 2000s, investigators began revisiting the original case files, looking for anything that could be re-examined. Old evidence, once too degraded or small to test, was sent to advanced crime labs for modern DNA analysis. Even a single hair, a trace of skin, or a touch of saliva could now reveal what 1992 science never could. But there was a problem. Much of the evidence from 1717 East Elmar had been mishandled or contaminated. Samples were incomplete, and in some cases, lost altogether. The frustration among detectives was palpable. They finally had the technology but not the data. Still, hope wasn't dead. Around this time, a new generation of investigators began to rise, not inside police departments, but online. True crime forums, Reddit communities, and YouTube creators began piecing together timelines, maps, and witness reports. People who had never set foot in Springfield were suddenly analyzing satellite images, comparing photos, and questioning official reports. For the first time, the Springfield Three had gone global. Armchair detectives started uncovering forgotten clues, police sketches that had never been released, inconsistencies in interviews, and old newspaper details long buried in archives. They connected with former officers, family members, and local journalists, creating a network that rivaled official investigations. The internet didn't just reopen the case, it gave it a heartbeat again. Then, in the 2010s, genealogy testing revolutionized forensics. Cases thought unsolvable for decades were cracked by matching DNA from crime scenes to relatives in public databases. Every cold case solved elsewhere, from the Golden State Killer to forgotten disappearances, sparked a new question in Springfield. Could this be the key to finding Suzie, Stacy, and Sherrill? Investigators quietly re-examined every sample they had left, sending it to modern labs. While results have never been made public, rumors persist that trace DNA, possibly from an unknown male, was recovered from one of the women's belongings. If that's true, it could be the final thread waiting for a match. Even after 3 decades, the case still has active detectives assigned to it. They monitor online tips, recheck reports, and work with the FBI to preserve every scrap of potential evidence. Meanwhile, the victims' families, though older now, still believe that the truth can be found. One of Stacy's relatives once said, "If we can find people missing for 50 years through DNA, why not them? Someone knows something. Someone always knows." And maybe in the quiet corners of the digital world, the clue that solves this mystery is already waiting, hidden among the noise, just waiting for the right eyes to see it. Decades of theories, suspects, and dead ends have all led to one haunting truth. No one is truly gone until we stop looking. The Springfield Three remain a symbol of hope, loss, and the dark corners of human mystery. Echoes of the missing. It has been more than 3 decades since June 7th, 1992. The night 3 lives vanished from a quiet home on East Elmar Street in Springfield, Missouri. No arrests, no remains, no clear answers. For years, this case has lingered like a ghost, haunting the hearts of everyone who remembers those women. Sherrill Levitt, a devoted mother and hard-working stylist. Suzie Streeter, vibrant, bold, and full of energy. Stacy McCall, a bright-eyed graduate with a lifetime ahead of her. 3 women, 3 stories, all connected by one night that still echoes through time. In the quiet corners of Springfield, the house they disappeared from still stands. People drive by it, slowly, respectfully, as if expecting to see something move behind the curtains. For those who live through it, that home is not just a building. It's a scar. Over the decades, countless theories have come and gone. The green van, the buried garage, the confessions, the psychics. Yet the truth remains hidden, just beyond reach. Investigators still revisit the files every few years, and each new generation of detectives adds fresh eyes and new hope. And online, the search never stopped. Across YouTube, Reddit, and podcasts, people continue to tell their story, not to exploit it, but to keep it alive. Because the moment we stop talking about them, that's when they truly disappear. Some mysteries are not meant to end in resolution, but in remembrance. The Springfield Three remind us that behind every headline are lives, real, human, full of love, laughter, and dreams that were never meant to be cut short. Maybe one day, technology will reveal what happened. Maybe someone's conscience will break and they'll speak. Or maybe the women themselves will finally be found, giving their families the peace they've been denied for far too long. Until then, all that remains is their memory, and our responsibility to keep asking, keep searching, and never let their story fade. Because somewhere in Springfield, Missouri, the echoes of that night are still calling for justice. If this story moved you, help us keep their memory alive. Please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel, because every view, every comment, and every share helps push the story forward. We post new mysteries and true crime documentaries daily, stories that deserve to be heard, and voices that must not be forgotten. 30 years later, every theory has been examined, but few truly make sense. Let's revisit them one by one. A random predator struck in the early hours, lured the women out, and took them quietly. Supporters point to the lack of struggle and the van sighting. Critics ask, how could one person control 3 adults without noise or witnesses? Some investigators believed Suzie was the true target, tied to a car theft ring she had testified against. Was revenge the motive? Did she recognize her abductors and quietly obey out of fear for her mother and friend? The drug connection theory. Rumors of a local drug operation swirl through old police notes. Certain names appear repeatedly: low-level dealers, construction workers, and known felons. Yet, none were ever charged. The serial link. Could the Springfield Three be part of a wider pattern? Between 1990 and 1993, multiple women vanished across the Midwest under eerily similar conditions. FBI analysts found commonalities, but no DNA or vehicle ties. The police cover-up theory. Some locals whisper that key evidence vanished from the department's own storage. Files misplaced, photos missing, leads ignored. No proof, but enough doubt to fuel decades of mistrust. Each theory carries fragments of truth, but none complete the puzzle. Perhaps the real story is a blend of all of them. A chance encounter, a familiar face, and a night that spiraled into silence. As the search for logic fails, emotion takes over. What does a disappearance this deep do to a community and to those left behind? The Springfield Three didn't just vanish from a house. they vanished from a town's sense of safety. Parents began double-locking doors. Teenagers stopped walking home at night. For months, search parties combed woods and rivers, hundreds of volunteers moving through silence. Local media kept their faces on screen every week. Candlelight vigils filled town squares. People who had never met the women wept openly because it could have been anyone. Sherrill's co-workers at the salon left her station untouched for years. Susie's high school friends held a reunion and left an empty chair for her. Stacy's bedroom remained frozen in time. Untouched trophies, graduation photos smiling back from a world that had already moved on. The pain didn't fade. It evolved. For the families, grief became ritual. Every birthday, every June 7th, they returned to the same hope. Maybe this year. Psychologists later described Springfield as suffering from collective trauma. It wasn't just 3 victims. It was a whole city caught between fear and faith. Yet through that darkness came unity. Neighborhood watches formed, DNA registries expanded, and Missouri strengthened missing person protocols that would save lives in future decades. 3 decades on, their legacy lives not only in memory, but in change. Their story shaped the way America searches for the missing. Every generation inherits mysteries that define them. For Springfield, it's the story of Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy, the Springfield Three. Because of their case, regional police units now share databases instantly. Cold case funds exist where there were none before. And online investigators, from YouTube to digital archives, have turned passive curiosity into active justice. Their disappearance became a lesson in evidence preservation, media power, and the resilience of ordinary people facing the unimaginable. When new families report loved ones missing, they often hear one phrase from officers across Missouri: "We'll never let another Springfield happen again." That is their legacy, not just mystery, but change. Somewhere, someone knows the truth. Maybe it's buried deep in memory, or hidden in an old file waiting for new eyes. And maybe, one day, when the right person finally speaks, the echoes of the missing will turn into the voices of the found. Until that day, we remember them. Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, Stacy McCall. If this story touched you, please help us keep their memory alive. Like, comment, and share this video so their names stay in the light. Subscribe to #DarkTruth25 for daily deep dives into true crime. Decades have passed, but their memory still echoes through Springfield. Every year, families gather in the same park, lighting candles for the 3 women who never came home. Police files now weigh hundreds of pages. Detectives who work the case still carry photos of Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy in their wallets. They say, "This one stays with you forever." Cold cases don't fade because people forget. They fade because time moves faster than memory. But some stories resist that. They hold on. The Springfield Three is one of those stories. Somewhere, someone knows what happened. Maybe it's buried deep in guilt. Maybe it's written in a file that's never been opened again. But the truth has a way of waiting, and one day it surfaces. Until then, we remember their names. Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, Stacy McCall. If this story moved you, don't let their memory fade. Like this video, share it, and help keep their case alive. Subscribe to #DarkTruth25, where every story is a search for justice, and every mystery is a fight against silence. Because truth doesn't vanish. It waits for someone to find it.